Welcome to all grade 9 learners and educators. My name is Linda Hackner, and I represent the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. We are bringing to you the section in your curriculum that deals with the failure of the Weimar, the rise of the Nazi Party, outbreak of World War II, the Holocaust, people's experiences, and rescue and resistance. In this unit today, we're going to talk about people's experiences, other victims of Nazi Germany. In the last unit, we dealt with Jewish people. Today, we're going to look at other victims. So, grade 9, every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. And what do I mean by this? I mean that the Roma and Sinti, people of color, people with disabilities, were considered by the Nazis to be blood enemies. Blood enemies. Now, I mentioned to you about how the Nazis saw Jewish blood. I will go into more detail about how the Nazis saw the blood of these people in the next few slides. They also had other enemies, gay men, Jehovah's Witnesses, asocials, and these people they considered to be enemies of the state, along with political opponents, of course. Now, what's the difference between blood enemy and enemy of the state? Well, if you're a blood enemy, you can't change your blood. You will always be an enemy. If you're an enemy of the state, you could change, according to the Nazis. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Roma and Sinti people are often referred to by the insulting term gypsies. They consider it to be an insult, because along with the term gypsy comes a whole set of stereotypes. Those stereotypes are that gypsies drive around in caravans, that gypsies tell fortunes, that gypsies steal. And these were stereotypes that the Nazis bought into and tried to get their population to buy into. Now, what we know about the Sinti who lived in Germany, the Sinti particularly, was that they were very settled. Only 2% of the Roman Sinti were lived in caravans, moved around. Most of them were settled. For example, you had the Bamberger family who owned theaters in Berlin. This young man, Joseph Trollmann, was a Sinti man who became the German middleweight boxing champion of 1933. But unfortunately, the Nazis were not interested in him or in his title. They stripped him of his title and he perished in a Nazi labor camp. What about people of color? This young woman, we do not know her name, but this is a picture of a school group in Germany, was the offspring of a German soldier from Africa and a German woman living in Germany. Now, why were there soldiers from Africa in Germany? Well, because during World War I, countries that Germany had colonized in Africa sent men to fight on behalf of Germany. And those men who chose to remained and met women and married and had families and were living very settled and wonderful lives until the Nazis came to power. The Nazis said people of color had impure blood. And so what they did, because there were not many people of color in Germany, they decided to sterilize, that means remove the ability for people to have children, every young German who was of color, so that they could not have babies. So one young man, his name is Gert Schramm, is one of the very few Black people, who was sent to a concentration camp, and having been sent, survived it. Gert Schramm was sent to Buchenwald. Gert Schramm was also sterilized. He was never able to have children in his adult life. What did he do with his life after he survived? Well, grade 9s, he spent many years traveling the world, talking to students such as yourselves about the evils of racism and stereotyping. He passed away in 2016. People with disabilities, the Nazis said, had diseased blood. Now, what does this mean? It means nothing. People's blood is people's blood. But the Nazis said that if you had a disability, it was in your blood and you would pass it on. And they used major propaganda campaigns to get German people to believe that it was all right to sort of get rid of these people because they were costing so much money. So the Nazi regime began with sterilization, but when the war broke out in 1939, they moved to murder. They called it mercy killing, but indeed it was murder, grade 9. And who conducted these murders? Well, the people who ran the hospitals. Now, I've put a picture of Hadamar Hospital there particularly, because Hadamar was considered, before the Nazis came to power, as one of the most advanced hospitals for the treatment of people with disabilities. Doctors from all over the world came to learn from doctors at Hadamar. But when the Nazis came to power, Hadamar simply became a place of death for those people. And it was here that people with disabilities were murdered. What about enemies of the state? What do I mean by enemies of the state? Well, these people, for instance, Jehovah's Witnesses, were considered enemies of the state because they would not toe the line. They would not do what the state required of them. So what was it that the Jehovah's Witnesses would not do? Well, firstly, they would not fight in the army, because in their religion, you do not shed another person's blood. Under any circumstances, you do not shed blood. The Jehovah's Witnesses would not make straight-arm Nazi racist salute. They would not see Hitler as their leader. They said only God is their leader. Grade 9, there was a little form that they had to sign, a little blue piece of paper, simply stating that Hitler is the Führer and that they will follow Hitler. All they had to do was sign that document, and they would have been free to live their lives. There is no evidence that any single Jehovah's Witness signed that document, preferring rather to be imprisoned than to go against their beliefs. Gay men were considered enemies of the state. And why might this be? Well, grade 9, the Nazis wanted all people of so-called pure blood to make as many babies as possible, and gay men were not doing what the Nazis considered to be their duty. Gay men were targeted before the Nazis came to power. Gay men had a particularly difficult time in concentration camps, and they were still targeted after the Nazis had been ousted from power. So laws against gay men were only repealed in Germany in the 1970s. What about political opponents? I haven't mentioned them up until now. Grade 9s, when the Nazis came to power, anyone who opposed them politically was taken and thrown into jail, either to change their views or to die. So political opponents were given no means whatsoever to indicate that they opposed the government. The Nazis would brook no opposition from anybody. So from this, grade 9s, you can see that the Nazis targeted people based on their beliefs, based on their lifestyle, and based on how the Nazis viewed their blood. Grade 9, I look forward to seeing you again in Unit 6. I'd like to thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.